I felt like the baboon, but I was smart enough to let go of the salt.
Man, like that's
Do you think so that you think is real? So
well, yeah. Not only that, I think that there's sacrifices going on every day in Los Angeles.
3 men, 3 completely different worlds. 1 church, 1 comedy stage, 1 Hollywood set. But if you lay their words side by side, they are all describing the same system, the same deal, the same price. And the man who has come the closest to naming it is someone Hollywood tried to erase. But here's what nobody is connecting. Jim Caviezel is not a name that trends. He doesn't show up at galas. He doesn't make deals over dinner in Beverly Hills anymore. And there's a reason for that. Because there was a moment, one defining, irreversible moment, where Jim Caviezel looked Hollywood in the face and said, no, not to a bad role, not to a low paycheck, but to the entire unspoken arrangement that keeps the machine running. When Mel Gibson came to Jim with the idea of playing Jesus Christ in what would become The Passion of the Christ, Mel didn't just hand him a script. According to what Jim has described publicly, Mel warned him with absolute clarity, if you take this role, your career in Hollywood is over. Not because the film would be bad, but because Hollywood, as a system, would blacklist him for glorifying the very thing it quietly despises. And Jim said yes anyway. But to understand why that decision was so significant, we first have to understand what Jim already knew about the industry he was walking away from. Long before Jim Caviezel made headlines for his spiritual declarations, Joe Rogan had been saying the same things from a very different angle. Not as a man of faith, but as a man who watched the machine operate from the inside during his years in Hollywood. According to Rogan, there has always been what he describes as a deal with the devil embedded in the entertainment industry. The structure is simple. Power flows through a small group of producers, directors, and executives. If you want access, if you want the biggest roles, the biggest stages, the biggest deals, there is an unspoken cost, and everyone who enters the building knows what that cost is.
you would go into his office, and this is like, in the 60s or whatever. So he had his office, and then he had a whole bedroom in his studio.
Yeah.
Where he would bang all the starlets. Like, if you wanted to be a star, you had to bang that guy. Which is just the deal with the devil.
That story Rogan was told, about the bedroom in the office, about the starlets, about the exchange. He doesn't treat it as a rumor. He treats it as documented history, as just how things work. And what makes it chilling is not the detail. It's the casualness of it, the normalization. Because here's what Joe Rogan says about child actors in this same system. The very people who are the most vulnerable, the kids, are protected the least. And allegedly, most of the time, the people who should be protecting them are in on it.
Hollywood managers who manage kids, it's a racket, man.
Did you hear that kid from Stream?
Rogan also brought in what musician Sturgill Simpson had reportedly told him, that the same dynamic that exists in film exists in music, that the entertainment business as a whole, movies, TV, music, runs on the same currency: power, compliance, silence. Now this is where we shift, because what Jim Caviezel went through while filming The Passion of the Christ reads less like a film production and more like a spiritual war. During the filming of the crucifixion scene alone, he endured a dislocated shoulder, severe hypothermia, and irregular heart rhythm that would later require 2 separate open-heart surgeries. He was exposed to freezing temperatures for so long that his hands went completely numb. He lost sensation in his body. The physical cost of playing Jesus was, in Jim's own account, his own body breaking apart in the process. But then came something no production manual could have prepared anyone for.
And then I was struck by lightning on the last shot of the movie. And so I just kept going, but I remember hearing Jesus say to me, "Am I too close?" And I said, "You're not close enough."
That's not a metaphor. That's not poetic language. Jim Caviezel was literally struck by lightning while hanging on a cross during the final shot of The Passion of the Christ. And his response, as he's described it, was not panic. It was not fear. It was a conversation. Now, let's sit with that for a second, because this is where what Jim is describing and what Joe Rogan and others have described about Hollywood begin to intersect in a way that people are not talking about. According to Rogan, Hollywood is a place where power is maintained through what he calls cult-like dynamics. He draws a direct comparison. Every cult eventually becomes sexual. Every person who gains that kind of power over a steady stream of vulnerable, beautiful, ambitious people eventually turns it toward the same thing. And yet, Jim Caviezel, standing inside that exact industry, chose to make a film that put the power somewhere else entirely. Not in a producer, not in a studio, not in a contract, in God. And they never forgave him for it. But the most extraordinary part of Jim Caviezel's account, a piece that very few people are talking about, is what he says happened during the filming, not on set, in his private room, alone.
And I looked over the left side of my bed, and there he was. And I didn't hesitate. I didn't go, oh my gosh, I'm having an apparition here. I just went, why is my Lord weeping?
Kings, jacks, queens, death masks, cards that started 1 for me, 9 for God, and ended all for me, none for God. Now here is where the connection gets sharp, because what Jim describes in that vision is structurally identical to what Rogan, Roger Avery, and others have described about the power structure in Hollywood. A small group of people, producers, executives, directors, who started with talent and a gift, and slowly, deal by deal, began keeping more for themselves and less for anything higher than them. The faces on those cards, they had death masks, not because Jim was being dramatic, but because in his account, that is what happens to a soul that makes the final trade. You get everything on earth, and you arrive at the door with a death face. 1 for me, 9 for God, then 2 for me, 8 for God, until it becomes all for me. That is not a theological abstraction. That is a description of every career arc in Hollywood that Rogan has talked about. There is another man who, without using the word soul, described the exact same trade that Jim Caviezel's vision illustrated, and his name is Dave Chappelle. Dave walked away from $50 million, then more, and at the time, nobody understood why. Oprah went on television and implicitly questioned his sanity. The industry treated his exit like a nervous breakdown. But Joe Rogan, who has watched Hollywood from a front row seat for decades, says he understood exactly what Dave was doing. And Dave himself explained it with a parable so clean and so precise that when you lay it next to Jim Caviezel's vision of the death mask cards, they are almost the same story.
Put a lump of salt in a hole, and they wait for the baboon. The baboon comes, sticks his hand in the hole, grabs the salt. Salt makes his hand bigger, and he's trapped. He can't get his hand out. Now, if he's smart, all he does is let go of the salt. Baboon doesn't want to let go of the salt. Then the bushman just comes, takes the baboon, throws him in the cage, and gives him all the salt he wants. And then the baboon gets thirsty. The bushman lets him out the cage. The first place the baboon runs to is water. Bushman follows him, and they both drink to their fill. And in that analogy, I felt like the baboon. But I was smart enough to let go of the salt.
One man saw it in a vision on a bed in a cold room in the middle of the night during the most physically destructive filming experience in Hollywood history. Another man saw it from a comedy stage with $50 million sitting in front of him. But they both saw the same thing. The salt in the hole, the death mask cards, the deal that starts small and ends with everything. Jim gave up his career. Dave gave up the money. Both walked away from the trap before it closed. But not everyone walked away. Harvey Weinstein had it written into his contract that harassment claims against him came with a graduated financial penalty. The first offense cost a certain amount. The fourth offense cost more. It was literally budgeted, built into the paperwork, which means the people who signed it knew, the lawyers knew, the studios knew.
That's like first offense was $100,000, second offense was $250,000, third offense was $750,000, fourth offense was $1 million. He had it written into his contract with Miramax. His contract with the Weinstein Company.
Roger Avery, an Academy Award-winning director who has moved in these same circles, sat on Joe Rogan's podcast and said something that stunned even Rogan. When the Epstein files dropped and the world was expecting shock and outrage, Avery was surprised that no one was surprised. He said, "It's like everyone just kind of accepted it and moved on."
I can't believe that, like, everybody just kind of like, oh, well, okay, and they're moving on with their lives.
And Jim Caviezel's warning about prosperity gospel and false teachers inside the church lands here with new weight. Because what Jim is describing is not just a Hollywood problem, it is a human problem. A spiritual architecture that exists in entertainment, in politics, in religion, in finance, wherever power concentrates, wherever there is a steady stream of people who want something and someone with the authority to give it. Jim says Hollywood wanted nothing to do with him after the Passion of the Christ because he promoted something they are, in his words, staunchly against: God. And if you take his word at face value, that's not just theological, that's structural. Because a system built on the deal he described in that vision cannot afford to have a man walking around who publicly refused the deal and didn't collapse. Jim Caviezel said something to Mel Gibson before agreeing to take the role of Jesus, something that functions as the thesis of everything this video has laid out: the cross or the deal, the salt or the cage, the death mask or the way out. That is the choice Jim Caviezel says he made. And according to what multiple voices have now said in courtrooms, on podcasts, on live television, in private rooms during the filming of a movie about Christ, that is the choice Hollywood has been offering people for a very long time. Jim Caviezel lost his career. He nearly lost his life. He died on an operating table and came back. He was struck by lightning on a cross and felt a presence ask him if it was close enough. And yet the man is still standing. Make of that what you will. If what these men are describing is true, even partially, then the question isn't just who got caught. The question is, what price did the ones who didn't get caught already pay? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe if this made you think, and watch until the end, because the clip we showed at the beginning hits completely differently now.